Hi everyone and welcome in on the YouTube Live, where we are going to make this sledding slider card with the cute sledding critters from the new Lawn Fawn release. It's the Snow One Like You set, so that is this one, and it's super cute. I really like this mini set, so adorable. So, we're going to make this mini slimline card with a slider. And what I do with all my cards, I start with the coloring, so let's go. I already stamped out the images and already die cut them. I placed them back with some tape for easy coloring, and it saves some time on the live die cutting everything. Hi everyone, hi Laura. I wanted to say, if you are Dutch, so if you don't understand something, please tell me in the chat and I will try and translate it quickly. Let me say that in Dutch real quick. Hoi alle Nederlandse mensen, mochten jullie iets niet snappen, laat het me even weten, dan probeer ik het snel eventjes te vertalen. Oké. Let's go. So I'm going for the trees first. Because it's easy, some easy coloring, and then I go for the critters. So from the new release I got myself this mini stamp set, and I also got the bats, both of the bats sets, and I actually recorded 2 videos today, so they are going to be on my channel soon. One is coming this week and the other one has to wait a little bit longer, but those are both with the bats. And I ordered some more things in, but those were from older releases, because I had some things on my wish list and I wanted to get those too. But it's always fun to have at least something new. So I always go in with my darkest marker first. And then I blend it out, and I usually go back with the darkest marker, and sometimes with the lightest even a second time too. So the trees are just some easy coloring, nothing fancy. They don't need much to be super cute. So if you want to know which stamp sets and things I used, you can find that in the blog post I linked in the description. So you can check that out. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And I will also take a moment to share some of the links to the Lawn Fawn site. So this is the set where I got the trees from. And this is the Snow One Like You set. So the critters on the sled. And the rest I will share later on. So now I'm going back with the darkest color. And this gives it just a little more depth. So that's the top part of the trees. Let's continue with the bottom. So nothing fancy here either. Just my darkest color, and I'm going to blend it out with my lighter color. And I'm going back in with the darkest just for a little bit. And now for the critters. Let's use this for the sleigh. Like that. And let's do the bear first. Let me check which colors I want to use. You have to check for a little bit which parts are which. So I'm now blending it out. I'm going back in with the darkest marker. Laura asks, is this class going to be recorded to come back to it? Yes, right after the stream, just check my channel and it should be there, or at least really soon. So it goes automatically up. It's just everything like you see it here, so it's no editing. It's just like we did on the live. Now, some lighter colors for the bunny. and I'm going back with my darker color. Stephanie asks, what type of Copics do you prefer, sketch, marker or chow? I think you mean the classic one instead of marker, but I actually have the most of the classics because I already had some for college. And when I started card making, it was the logical thing to buy more classics. And then I got to buy a big stash of Copics from someone for really cheap, and those had some classics, some chow and some sketch as well. And I actually didn't love the brush nib before, so that's also why I had the classics, because they don't have a sketch or a brush nib. So that's what I preferred at first. But now that I'm using it for a longer time, I have to say I like coloring with the brushes as well. So I think I prefer the sketch or the chow for some type of coloring. Like for the trees, it's fun to use the brush to stroke down and have a different kind of look. And you won't get that with the classic. But in general, the classic markers have a little more ink compared to the sketch. So you get a little more for your money. So you can add a little bit of shade to one color. So this marker I use for the whole rim of the hat and a little fluff on top. But when you go back in, you add a little more color and you still get a little bit of shading. Why did you go college for? I did graphic design. So for the hat and the scarf, we're going to switch the colors. So we give the purple hat to the bunny with a blue scarf, and a blue hat with a purple scarf to the bear. Let me check which color I used. I think it's this one. And this should be fine. So I chose these colors because they come back in the background as well, which is always a fun thing to do. It makes your card look less busy when colors are repeated, and it's just it ties it in really well. So I don't know if it's my paper or just that purple is a difficult color for Copics or markers in general. But the purple always gets a little bit blue when I blend it out. So I go back in with the darkest one. And let me check. This is the blue color, the darkest one first. And now see, I forgot to color in the bunny's nose, so let's do that after this. Let me put some things back. I have a small working space, so I have to clean things up. Sophie says, congratulations on being featured on Funny Friday. Such a fantastic card. Thank you. Let me show which card it was. I have it over here. So it was this card that I made with the new release, at least the sentiments from the new release, and the moon and the cloud stencil. And the bat was one of the things I got from my wish list. So that was this one. I was really happy to see that I was featured on Funny Friday. What are the purples? It are... Let me check. These two. So now I'm going to add some highlights, and what I always do with my images, and that's mostly because of my paper that I use a very smooth paper, and I like to go over the inner lines with a black fine liner, especially with the darker parts. So for example with the bear, because the lines get a little bit dull after coloring. And normally I do the whole image with every line inside, but this is so much lines and I don't want to mess things up. So doing the eyes and the paws, and maybe here the ears, and that is fine. That bat is too cute. I'm glad it was featured. Thank you, Marcy. So I'm going in with the Uniball Signo gel pen. And I just add lines where I feel like having them. And a general rule for that, for me, is going into curves and roundness of things. And I like to do a line and a dot. Almost done. So that's the coloring. Do you have a bird as a pet? Yeah, I do, and he's in the living room, and I think you might hear him sometimes. So I'm popping these out. So normally I would die cut it after the coloring, but this saves some time. You don't want to see me align dies and die cut everything. So that are the images. Now put those aside for a bit. So I put my markers away for now. And then I'm going to continue with the background. So I made a card base out of craft paper. I cut two stitched rectangles from the mini slimline set. This is from the smallest mini slimline, and the pattern papers with the largest. So these nest together, so you get a nice line of pattern paper. And I used a different pattern paper than on the example card. This is from the Perfectly Plaid paper pack. I figured that would be really cute as well. And we're going to glue that on later. Then we have a background layer, and we have a rectangle where we're going to cut the hill from with the slider part. So first we're going to make the background, and I'm going to use this card to give myself a little mark. So about halfway is the part where I'm going to blend my background. I don't have to do a lot of effort to blend everything if it's just going to be covered with a hill anyway. So for the colors I used shaded lilac and tumbled glass, distress oxides, and because it's just an easy gradient, I like to use the blender tools. So I'm blend that about halfway. And then I'm blending in with my tumbled glass over the shaded lilac for a bit. And then without picking up any new ink, I'm going back in with the shaded lilac blending tool. And I do the same with the tumbled glass. Just a little bit of ink on the shaded lilac one. And that's a nice background. Marcy asks, do you plan your card scenes before starting your projects? I do. For my videos, I always make a card ahead before I do it on a live or on a video, because I want to make sure I can focus on creating the card and just enjoy making the card. And when it's on video and I didn't design the card on beforehand, there's a lot of images, so footage that I can't use because it's me thinking about what I want to do and which colors I want to use and stuff like that. And also sometimes I do something in a certain way, and after I'm finished I figure I should have done it another way, so I can catch that and make sure I explain that in the video. And I do that by laying down I just cleaned this up, but I still need it. I do this by laying down my dies and my stamps. So for example, I lay down this one because that's the background. I understand I want a little bit of a border for pattern paper. Then I have the hill, for example, so I figure out something like this, and then I have my stamp out and I lay it down, and for example all the trees, I only have 2 of those, so I lay those down just to give me an idea. It gave me an idea to plan the sentiment here, so by laying down my stuff I can plan ahead for a little bit. So now we're taking the snowflake stencil. This is also something I got with my order. I didn't got it last year. Let me link to the stencil on the Lawn Fawn site. And I figured it would be really fun with the snow one like you said. So I went for it. So it's a layering stencil set. And I start with Mermaid Lagoon. And I do this with a blending brush, because the blending brush will get into the pieces of the stencil. I think this should be far enough. So now I'm taking the shaded lilac again, cleaning my brush for a little bit on my cleaning rack. It doesn't have to be squeaky clean because it's going to blend anyway. This will give it just a little bit of color change on the snowflakes. For my example, I used a little bit darker one, but I wanted to try a lighter one in the life. So you see that's really subtle. Now we're going to layer the next stencil. I think it's something like this. Oh. So I'm using Mermaid Lagoon again, cleaning off my brush for a bit. And maybe it's fun to do these with a little darker purple. So we have a little bit of variation in the background. So let me use Wilted Violet for that. And I'm just using a tiny bit because I don't want it to get too dark. So that's our background. I think that's really cute. It has to dry a little before we do the heat embossing. So let's cut the hill now. So this is the same rectangle, and I used one of the hillside, simply hillside or simple hillside. I don't know the name, but it's in the blog post that you can find in the description. And let's find a fun angle for the hill, and I use my example card to figure out how high it should be. But I also always check if the stitch line is on the bottom, because I messed that up a few times. So let me run that through the die cutting machine. This can be a little bit awkward on video. So this part we don't need. So this is the hill. It's a little bit shorter than on my example, but that's okay. And I used this slider die for my stash, but I don't know, I think it's off-brand because I couldn't find which brand it is. A while back I bought some random dies and this was in it, but I saw that it matches kind of so this set from Lawn Fawn, it's the slide on over. There's also a piece that looks like this, so you can use that. That looks so nice. Thank Maya. Perfect colors for snowflakes. Thank you, Marcy. Sorry, too late. Hi, Mara. Welcome in. Sophie says the gradient in the snowflakes is so pretty. Thank you so much. So we're just going to align this in the middle, and I want to measure that out for just to be sure. I put it a little bit higher up because our hill is a little bit shorter. And I'm going to run this to the die cutting machine as well. So the piece that it cut, we also need that. So this is our hill. And now we're going to do the sentiment first. So for that I'm using some baby powder and a brush. And because I want to make sure, because I just blended it, it could be that it's just a little moist. So I'm powdering it really, really well. So the embossing powder won't stick to anything it shouldn't. And we're using white and we're splattering the background with white as well, so it wouldn't matter if it got some specks, but just to be sure. So I'm using my Misty for that. And this is with the Shutter Card Holiday Sayings. And I'm using the Let It Snow and some ornaments. So I'm first going to stick these stems together. The ornament just fits in this piece, and then we align the top one. And I'm going to measure it again because I want to make sure it's in the middle. It is. And let me put it straight. So with clear embossing ink, I'm going to ink that up really well. And I gently press down with clear embossing ink. And let me check, yeah, it's stamped well. So we can put the pad aside and clean off my stamp. And let me put it back really quick. And now with white embossing powder. There's a little bit on the snowflake here, so I'm brushing that off. And there is something on the S. It was a little hair or something. So I'm going to mute my microphone for a little bit because I'm going to heat emboss, and I'm going to preheat my heat gun so it gets really nice and hot, so I can melt this quickly, so I have less warping of my paper. But that's a little noisy, so I'm going to mute it for a little bit, and I'm going to be back after the heat embossing. So there it goes. And I'm back. So as you could see, it went really quick. Laura asked, can you give any tips for embossing? My melts very bad. I don't know when's a good time to stop. So when you just point your heat gun in the air for a minute or so, when you turn it on, it will get really nice and hot. And you can melt the powder real quickly. And if you watch the video back after the live, you could skip to the heat embossing part, and you could see the grainy part turns into a solid, nice embossing. And if you continue after it look like this, so when it's nice and shiny, and if I should continue now, it will get really bad because it would burn and melt even further. So now it got time to cool off, and I'm cleaning off the excess baby powder. And now the background is finished. So what we're going to do now is, before I'm starting to assemble the card, I use a coin for the slider part. But the coin is dirty, and I don't want to, when every time it slides, it get a little grimy in there. So I'm using some glossy accents to glue on. Let me unclog. So I glue on just a white piece of cardstock that I cut with a circle die. And I'm doing this now so it can dry before we glue it in. So now when it slides, the paper touches the paper, so we won't get any grunginess in there. So we're going to assemble now. And normally I would adhere this to my card, and then I normally use some foam tape to adhere this on that, but because the slider part already gets a little bit bulky, I don't want to add any more bulk by using foam tape. So I'm just gluing this on my pattern paper. And I do this with my ATG. And now we're going to use the ATG to glue that on the card base. So I always start with aligning the panel from the fold of the card, because when the card would stick out for a bit, I could cut it off on this side, and you couldn't do that on the fold side. So now we're going to add the hill on here. So for that we need some foam tape. You can use 3mm foam tape, so the thicker one. But I don't have that on hand, so I'm using multiple layers of the thin foam tape, which is 1mm. So I stick a piece down, pull away the backing, and I can stick on the other piece. And we're going to do 3 layers, but I'm first doing 2, because I cut a piece and I cut that in half. And those parts are equally to each other, so you can stack them up real nice. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm almost done with the card. It's just a little bit of assembling, so the life doesn't take too long from now. So be sure to ask your questions. If you have any questions afterwards, you can always message me on Instagram or on Facebook, or leave a comment over here, and I will be happy to answer your questions. So this might be a little bit boring to see, because it's just stacking up some foam tape. Almost done. Before I'm going to stick it to my card, I'm using the baby powder again, because all these layers will stick, and especially the ones on the bottom. The coin will be sliding from here to here, so it could stick. Oh, the glossy accents didn't stick really well. So the coin slides up and down and could get caught in the stickiness. So I'm using just a little bit of baby powder to remove that stickiness. Also a little bit of baby powder in the slot to make it glide really well. Laura asks, how do you plan your cards? I just told Marcy how I do that. So I normally use my supplies on my desk. So I pick a stitched rectangle, for example, if that's the size I want to use. And I'm just layering all my dies and stamps on that to see what I'm going to make. And it evolves along the way, but that gives me a general idea. So our hill is down, and now we need this piece. I'm first removing that little crease with my bone folder. That's a lot better. I'm looking for my tweezers over here. So I'm just putting in a little bit of glue. And then I drop in that little piece. And try to align it as good as possible. And let me check if this is all right now. I think so. So now I'm going to drop in the coin. And then move it over. And now we're using a piece of foam tape. This as wide as the slot is. I'm sticking that on the coin and I'm using the baby powder again, because I want to remove the stickiness on the sides. And I also want to make sure the slider goes really well, and the baby powder helps with that as well. So as you can see, we now have a slider. Peeling off the backing paper, taking our little critters, and I'm sticking that down. So as you can see, we have them sledding down the hill. So all we need to do now is add the little trees. So I did some layering with the trees. I did some on the hill, behind the hill, and when I did them behind the hill, I did some directly on the background and some with a little bit of foam tape. So that gives them a little bit of dimension. So what also adds a little bit of dimension is when they stick out of the frame for a little bit. So for this one, I'm gluing that one on the hill, but I also add a little bit of foam tape for some support on the top. And I'm gluing a small one directly to the background. And we're doing this on this side as well. But now I'm gluing this one. So this adds a lot of dimension, because the size of the trees varies, and the foam tape and gluing it on the hill and on the background varies as well. No, let's use foam tape for this one. So that's that, and just now when I was adhering the trees, I saw that I forgot to splatter some white paint on the background for the snow. But that's alright, because we're just going to use the gel pen. It takes a little bit of more work. And it's a little harder to do these really randomly in size and place. But it gets the job done, especially since I forgot to do it. So I'm almost done, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And again, if you have any questions later on, you can always just leave a comment or ask me on Instagram or Facebook. So I think that just looks as good. The layering of the trees are so genius, simple but pretty. Thanks, Sophie. It's just when you have two images, or even when you have one image, use some different heights in depth, so gluing them on a little bit of foam tape and on the hill gives so much dimension to your card, and that with just a few images. So this is our card. This is the one that I used as an example, and I changed up the snowflakes for a little bit and the pattern paper, but it's more or less the same. It's a really fun and easy card to do. If you use some thicker foam tape, that layering of that foam tape, you don't have to do that then. You just use some foam tape all around and you're done. So that was the live for today. If you have any questions, again, feel free to ask me in the comments or on Instagram or Facebook. And I'm going to do a video coming week, so keep an eye on my channel for that. Subscribe if you didn't have if you didn't done that yet. And I hope to see you again soon in my next live. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but there will be a live again, I think in 2 weeks. So have a wonderful rest of the weekend, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye all, thanks for being here.